Tonight, I bring you 3 terrifying true stories from the road. Stories that will make you question what's lurking in the dark. Before we begin, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to help me reach my goal of 100 subscribers. You never know when you'll need a story to keep you wide awake on your next late night drive. This is an absolutely true story, one that my fiance and my friends still bring up to this day. No matter how many years pass, I can still feel the tight grip of fear in my chest when I think about it. Back in high school, my hood rat friends and I had a routine. We'd take the back roads, blast music, get high, typical bored, small-town Midwest behavior. There were 5 of us packed into my car that night, windows cracked, the smell of weed thick in the air. I was driving. We were deep in the middle of nowhere, winding down a dark, curvy road that barely saw traffic in the daylight, let alone at nearly 2 a.m. We were laughing, vibing, until we saw the headlights. At first, it was just a pair of distant lights in my rearview mirror. I didn't think much of it at first, but then they got closer, and closer. Within seconds, the car was right on my bumper. No warning, no gradual approach. Just suddenly there. The mood in the car shifted instantly. Everyone went silent, tension crawling up our spines like icy fingers. My first thought? Cops. We were high as hell, and I was convinced they were running my plates before hitting us with flashing red and blue lights. My stomach dropped. This was it. But the lights never flashed. The sirens never came. And they didn't back off. 10 whole minutes passed, and this car stayed locked onto us. The road was dark. No streetlights, no intersections, no houses. Just endless trees and fields stretching into the void. The car never tried to pass, never honked, never signaled. Just followed. That's when my brain switched from, we're about to get arrested, to we're about to get murdered. Who the hell drives out this far, this late at night, just to tailgate random kids? My friends whispered frantic theories. Some crazy local, a serial killer, something worse. My hands clenched the wheel so tight my knuckles ached. I pressed the gas. The car sped up. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs. I pushed the speed limit, flying down those narrow roads. The headlights in my mirror never wavered. I wasn't thinking straight anymore. I just knew we had to get away. Then, we hit a steep hill. The road curved sharply at the top, and I gunned it, tires kicking up gravel as we crested over. For a split second as we rounded the bend, the headlights behind us disappeared from view. I glanced at the mirror, and they were gone. I blinked, slowing down slightly, waiting for them to reappear around the curve. Nothing. There were no roads to turn off of, no driveways, no intersections, no side streets. Just a dense wall of trees on either side of the road. We sat in stunned silence. Where the fuck did they go? Someone finally whispered. I threw the car into park, ignoring my racing heart. My friend in the passenger seat hesitated before slowly rolling down his window. The air outside was dead silent. No wind, no crickets, no distant engines. Nothing. I turned in my seat, scanning the darkness. The headlights had been right there just moments ago. There was no way they could have vanished that fast. One of my friends in the back muttered, "Let's just go. Now." I didn't need to be told twice. I slammed the car into drive and sped the hell out of there. We didn't stop until we reached the first gas station with bright, flickering fluorescent lights. Only then did we exhale, reality crashing back over us. The fear should have faded, but it didn't. None of us could explain what had happened. To this day, I try to rationalize it. Maybe they turned off their lights. Maybe they somehow swerved into the trees without making a sound. But how? There was no road, no space, just nothing. And the worst part? I still dream about it. Some nights I'm back on that road, hands white-knuckling the wheel, my friends whispering nervously in the background. The headlights appear behind me, closer, too close. But when I crest that hill and look back, I never see them vanish. Instead, they keep following. I was driving across the country from Washington State to Georgia between June 29th and July 4th, 2023. It was a long trip, but my friend and I were used to road tripping. We took turns at the wheel, pushing through endless stretches of empty highway. Somewhere after Laramie, Wyoming, I passed out in the passenger seat, lulled into unconsciousness by the hum of the road. When I woke up, we were passing through Colorado Springs, and my friend looked shaken. His face was pale, his hands gripping the steering wheel too tight. We pulled over to switch seats, and that's when he said it. "I've been seeing headless dogs for the last 40 miles. I laughed at first. "Dude, you need sleep." "No, I'm serious." His voice was flat, hollow. "Dozens of them." "No, hundreds." I stared at him, waiting for a punchline, but he just rubbed his eyes and stumbled into the passenger seat. "Just drive, man. I need to shut my eyes." I shook it off, thinking exhaustion was messing with him. But then I pulled onto the freeway, and I saw them. Scattered along the shoulder, just beyond the glow of my headlights, were bodies. Dogs. Dead, mutilated dogs. All of them headless. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles turning white. The first one I saw looked like a golden retriever, its fur matted and dark with blood. Then another, a Doberman, its sleek black body unnaturally still. And another. And another. Some were sprawled in the gravel, their legs twisted at wrong angles. Others were piled together like someone had deliberately arranged them. And the heads, God, the heads, were tossed carelessly along the median, mouths frozen in silent screams. I tried to rationalize it. A freak accident. Maybe a dogfighting ring. Maybe roadkill that had been moved somehow. But hundreds. For 60 miles I drove through a graveyard. I didn't talk. I didn't breathe. I just kept my foot on the gas, my stomach turning with every broken body that flashed past. I wanted to wake my friend, to ask if he'd seen the same things. But I knew the answer. After an eternity, the carcasses stopped appearing. The road ahead was just asphalt and emptiness again, like none of it had happened. I pulled off at the next exit, into the safety of a gas station lit up like a beacon. Other travelers milled around, filling their tanks, stretching their legs. Normalcy. Sanity. I barely made it to the bathroom before I vomited. My dog was still curled up in the back seat, breathing softly, oblivious to what we had just driven through. I ran a shaking hand over her fur, whispering a silent prayer that she hadn't seen any of it. I told myself it was over, but it wasn't. The next morning, something worse happened, and I don't know if I should even talk about it. We left the gas station before dawn, hoping to put as much distance between ourselves and that stretch of highway as possible. My friend refused to drive. He said he'd had nightmares, that he'd seen something in his rearview mirror the whole time he was behind the wheel. He wouldn't tell me what. The road ahead was empty, just endless pavement stretching into nothingness. But the silence was wrong. No birds, no wind. Even my radio refused to pick up a signal, just static hissing through the speakers. Then, around midday, I caught something in the distance. A figure, standing in the middle of the road. I squinted against the glare, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. At first, it looked like a person. Tall, thin, motionless. But as I got closer, dread pooled in my stomach. It wasn't a person. It was a dog. A massive dog, standing on its hind legs. Its fur was black as tar, its limbs unnaturally long. Its front paws dangled at its sides like limp, useless arms. But its head, it had no head. I slammed on the brakes, my heart hammering against my ribs. My dog, startled awake, let out a low whine in the back seat. The thing didn't move. Then, slowly, it raised one hand and pointed at me. My breath hitched. Every instinct screamed at me to hit the gas, to get the hell out of there. But my body refused to move. Then, without warning, the creature dropped to all fours and sprinted toward me. It moved too fast, too smooth. Its body blurred like a smear of ink, covering distance impossibly quick. I reacted just in time. Slamming the car into reverse, I spun the wheel hard, tires shrieking against the pavement. My friend jolted awake, shouting, but I didn't have time to explain. The thing was still coming. I threw the car into drive and floored it, my chest heaving. When I dared a glance in the mirror, it was gone. Nothing but an empty road behind us. My friend sat rigid in his seat, gripping the dashboard. "Did you?" I nodded. We didn't say another word for hours. We never spoke about it again. But I haven't taken that route since. And sometimes, when I drive at night, I swear I see something, standing just beyond the glow of my headlights, watching, waiting, pointing. I live in Northern California, but my family is in LA. I usually take the 101 to the 5 when I visit, but I like to plan extra days to explore different routes. There's something peaceful about driving into unknown places, stopping at weird roadside attractions, and finding hidden diners. Once, my car broke down in the middle of nowhere, and I was grateful for the extra time I'd taken off work. But none of those trips compare to what happened in Diablo County. I only remember the name because of a giant cow statue standing alone on the side of the freeway. It was massive and unsettling, its empty eyes staring out over the road. The kind of thing that sticks with you for no reason. My boyfriend at the time was half asleep in the passenger seat, and I was exhausted from driving for hours when we saw lone Denny's sitting off the highway. It was the only building in sight. No gas station, no motels, just an old Denny's glowing under flickering yellow lights. The parking lot was packed. At least a dozen cars. Probably more. I had to circle twice before I found a spot near the back. But the moment I turned off the engine, something felt off. It wasn't just the isolation. It was the silence. With that many cars, the place should have been bustling. Doors opening and closing, people coming in and out, the distant hum of conversation. But there was nothing. The air was unnervingly still, the neon sign buzzing softly in the quiet. I glanced at my boyfriend, but he just shrugged, already reaching for the door handle. Inside, the feeling got worse. A hostess stood near the entrance, talking to a man in a dirty white shirt. The second we walked in, they froze. Both of them. Their heads snapped toward us, and their expressions twisted into something that made my stomach drop. They looked furious, not annoyed, not tired, but genuinely furious. Their eyes burned with a quiet rage, like we'd interrupted something we weren't supposed to see. I've worked in food service. I know the frustration of dealing with customers. But this wasn't that. This was deeper, darker. The hostess didn't speak. She just grabbed 2 menus and walked ahead, forcing us to follow. She led us through 4 empty sections, past rows of silent booths, before stopping at the farthest table in the restaurant. She slammed the menus down and walked away without a word. That was when I realized, despite the full parking lot, there were no other customers. The entire place was empty. I turned to my boyfriend. His face was pale, his unease mirroring mine. But we were already here. Leaving now would feel wrong. So we stayed. Our waitress arrived moments later. Unlike the hostess, she was eerily calm, her voice soft and polite. She took our order with practiced efficiency, as if nothing had happened. But something about her smile was off. Too tight, too rehearsed. As we waited for our food, I kept glancing around. The restaurant was old, but not abandoned. The lights flickered occasionally, and the air smelled faintly of grease, but everything was too clean. There was no background noise, no clatter of dishes, no sizzling from the kitchen, no murmurs from unseen patrons. Just silence. And then there were the cars. Every few minutes, I would glance out the window, expecting to see movement. But none of the cars had changed. No one got in or out. No headlights turned on. They just sat there, still and lifeless, like they had been parked for years. When our food arrived, it was perfect. Almost too perfect. The eggs were cooked exactly how I liked them. The coffee was hot but not scalding. And the bacon was crispy to the point of feeling unnatural. Neither of us ate much. The feeling of being watched grew heavier with every passing minute. But every time I turned my head, there was no one there. We hurried through the meal, paid in cash. Somehow pulling out my card felt like a bad idea, and practically bolted for the exit. The moment we stepped outside, the night felt too dark. The air was heavy, thick with something I couldn't name. The stars above us seemed wrong, like they were positioned just slightly off from where they should be. We got into the car quickly. I locked the doors, turned the key, and backed out of the lot without looking back. But as I pulled onto the highway, something made me glance at the rearview mirror. The Denny's lights were still on, glowing eerily in the distance. And through the windows, I could see figures standing at the entrance, watching us leave. We didn't stop again until we reached the next town. Neither of us spoke. We just sat in silence, listening to our own breathing. The next day, I tried looking up the Denny's in Diablo County. I couldn't find it. No address, no listing, no mentions online. It doesn't exist, but I know what I saw. And sometimes late at night, I still wonder, what would have happened if we had stayed just a little longer?